Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Tribal's Open Demo, our bi-weekly session where we bring real customers, real orgs, real builds, and showcase what Tribal is capable of doing. If you're joining for the first time, what's going to happen over the next 30 minutes, I'll introduce my wonderful guests and I'll try to speak as less as possible for the remainder of the call. I will start with saying a few words about what Tribal is all about, and then we'll dive into our story. But before introducing Tribal, I'm joined by two wonderful guests, Dima and Gabe. Please introduce yourself, where you're from, and what is your role?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Nikolai. So my name's Gabe McLarnan. I'm a RevOps Manager here at Eon. For those who don't know, we're a data infrastructure company and looking to scale pretty extensively in the next couple of months. And, just a little bit about my role, covers everything from commissions administration, reporting analytics, capacity planning. So really full stack RevOps. So it kind of runs the gamut. And excited to chat with everyone here about what we were able to do with Tribal.
Thank you so much for joining us, Gabe. And Dima.
Yeah, I'm Dima, and I'm forward deployed engineer here at Tribal. And throughout this project that Gabe just mentioned, that full-blown commission app, I've been helping Eon to have this amazing success.
Perfect. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. For those who are coming to this open demo for the first time, just a few words about Tribal. We are an agentic platform designed for the Salesforce teams with Tribal that reads, understands, and works alongside your team. And we are enabling Salesforce teams to accelerate their execution of analysis and technical data remediation. We enable teams to modernize and migrate to the latest and greatest of Salesforce, and of course, build new enterprise apps and agents that are actually deploying into production. And the purpose of today's call is really to dive into the amazing build that you, Gabe, and you, Dima, executed over the last couple of months. So please tell us, what is it that you've built and what will you be showing today?
Cool. I guess I would like Gabe to start by telling us what did they have before, how it all started, what is the manual process that they have in spreadsheets, and why did they decide to look for something robust, something more robust?
Yeah, happy to dive in there. So the initial reason we reached out to Tribal was we had a pretty convoluted commissions process. So I think, multiple spreadsheets, where we have folks that are outlined in terms of their quotas, BCRs, all that good stuff. And trying to calculate that on a quarterly, monthly process was fairly cumbersome. And you can imagine, right, to keep all that aligned takes quite a lot of work and, very little centralization, very little auditing capability for finance and just other stakeholders. And so the problem was how do we move this into a centralized solution, ideally in Salesforce, to give people one, better visibility, and then to kind of help with the compliance and calculations, all that good stuff. So that was the problem. And what we were able to build, I think, definitely solved that current state and going forward.
Amazing. Let's take a look at what we have. And as Dima loads up the environment, it was a full-fledged commission management app that you've built over the last 2 months. And Gabe, if I understood correctly, you came with a lovable prototype. You had pretty detailed requirements, but were you all fully spec'd out when that project started?
No, definitely not. So, we did come with a lovable mock-up of where we would like to essentially get to. But yeah, things were very fluid, like you said. So, we had new plans, new roles, as I mentioned before, we're scaling pretty rapidly. And so you think, almost entire new departments that are going to be part of the commissions process that we need to create incentive plans for. So yeah, all of that was sort of in flight as we were building the application. And so that was key at the start of the journey to see, can Tribal support that? But when we started the process, I think what we visualized was a control plane that essentially has all the building blocks you would need to create a commissions administration and deployment platform, right? So think of all the different spreadsheets you would need to kind of create an application, what kind of lives. And so, in particular, right, when you're creating the commission plan, as you can see on the top left, you need to create the plan period, define the specific criteria that you're paying out and the metric, and then payout cadence, right? So we can see the plan period of when you're administering the plan, but also how you're paying out, right? Currently we're quarterly, but we wanted to shift to monthly. So we wanted the platform to support that current and future state. And then here, based on our design, we wanted to align, multiplier templates, right? That's a key thing that we incent on. And so, putting that against the plan here. So this is kind of one of the core building blocks, like I said, and then templates can feed into that as well. I think the other important aspect too is, once you create the plan, you need to be assigning people to that plan, right? So the rep assignments tab here is where we're actually creating and administering and managing all the different employees across their roles. So you can see we have some folks here. So AEs, SDRs, the platform does support, all different roles, right? So, AEs, SDRs are going to have different components. And so, for example, if we go into like a new assignment and look at sort of how we set that up, you can see, right, we're outlining their initial information and then assign the commissions plan and then outlining, all the things you would essentially do in a spreadsheet, right? Like their variable comp, but you're pulling it all into here, right? And then assigning those, again, building blocks, right? So the templates that feed into that to then, deploy essentially. So yeah, super flexible, many different types of roles are supported with this process. And then, how we actually pay out it as well. So, I'd say fairly robust with what we've built. And again, like I said, the flexibility with different types of roles and all that stuff.
Hey, very, very cool. Dima, anything that you would add in terms of color of this pretty robust application that was built?
Yeah, absolutely. As you can see, we have plenty of controllables here, and this is for a good reason. This engine and commission engines across organizations, they're usually multi-component. So for example, we have ramp templates, accelerator tiers, we have spiffs and multiplier templates like Gabe mentioned. And all of this is supported and controllable in a flexible way. Let's say this period, I want to compensate people when they reach certain, let's say, subscription duration is over 24 months. Then I want to give them, I don't know, 2% multiplier on what they earn. And I can do it in such a flexible way. Then let's say we have any other parameter or any other thing that we want to compensate our people on, and I can switch it, I can add it and associate with the respective compensation plans. And all of it is controllable across all the settings. And then once you set up everything, you can actually run the period and see the results. And this is what I'm diving in right now. Let's say, what do we have for SDRs? This is our SDRs that I set up in this demo environment. And you can dive into each individual one and see what exact records fed into this results. You can also do overwrite, which is also very important. And you have full audit on what's going on, what exactly fed this commission, what is the attainment in the period, and so on and so forth. And so you don't have to spend hours in this countless spreadsheet where you're pulling some information in Salesforce and different objects. Then you try to reconciliate multiple things. It's all here and it's all built with Tribal. And I guess another important part of the system is the security, or let's say governance of all of it. Everything is gated. Nothing of it is like exposed to everyone. The sales operations has full visibility and can control all the settings and stuff like this. Individual contributors, they only see their results under my commissions. I'm not a sales rep, that is why I don't see any results, but it's gated, it's secure, and it's governed. I guess this is another big part of such an engine. Gabe, anything else you would love to add here while I'm demonstrating the app?
And just to add on, the My Commissions view, that was also a great win for us because, typically if this is all offline, which it was before, we'd have to send a spreadsheet or, it's communicated over email. But now, we can deploy and provide visibility to commissions to the employees right after we run the commission cycle, right? And that, is well received. People like to see things in one place and see the detail, see the visibility. So that was a huge win in terms of, employee morale, right? As we're growing, we need people to see how they're getting paid and the success of, their go-to-market work. So yeah, this was another huge win for us as well versus, again, offline and low visibility.
Very impressive. So I think there's just over 400 different components that went into this application. And between the two of you, you put it in production in just a couple of months. How did you do it?
Yeah, let me jump here to Tribal, our platform itself. And the first thing that I want to showcase here is the release tab. where we can see the whole track of this project, how we first started in developer environment. And this is quite a common like path for big Salesforce application of that nature. We started here in Dev Sandbox. You see, we had 154 iterations over there. Then when we felt that the application is more or less stable and in solid state, we moved to partial, where we have some real data to verify like everything on the real records of opportunities, meetings, and pay-as-you-go revenue. Here also we had plenty iterations, 55. And then finally we deployed it to production. And in production, when Gabe started rolling out it to people and showcasing it to different managers, we also, of course, noticed some missed points or logic that didn't exactly work as we wanted it to work. So we also had plenty iterations here. And I would say that the number of iterations in this couple of month periods is quite unprecedented in like regular development, where like iteration is, I don't know, but basically a week at least. And then imagine, Gabe, you asking me to do some sometimes even simple stuff, and you have to wait a week. Here, in most of the cases, I was able to give you results same day or like at worst the next day that you asked me. I'd love to hear how you experience this part of the build.
Yeah, like you said, I think the iteration was quite extensive, but the way that this framework's built makes it, fairly seamless. And even in the early stages too, as you can kind of see that 154 deployment number in Dev Sandbox, and a lot of that in the early stages at least was my self-serve querying, testing the architecture. Which I think, we'll kind of get into that structure. And so you yourself, right, can, play a more prominent role than say you would in any other implementation or sort of build process, right? And specifically on commissions applications, right? Like take any other tool or app. And, it's very configurable. It's high in configuration, which means, you're going to have to talk with someone for an extended period of time and it may not fit your exact requirements. So the iteration is much lower than what you can do here. So that was another big takeaway that I saw in the whole process.
Amazing. So for those who are listening in and seeing Tribal for the first time, you're actually looking at the last stage of the whole governed process, which is the deployment. And Tribal, of course, supports this kind of high velocity iteration. And as we were talking about the project earlier, Gabe, for you, that basically allowed to introduce new users and new use cases and new demands to the project without having them fully spec'd out at the beginning and without driving Dima nuts. But where does it start? What is the first part of the project if we shift from the end to the start of it?
Yeah, I'll start here. So we usually start in requirements, where we try to get as much context and like actual requirements for the thing that we're going to build. Then we feed it to Tribal, and then Tribal produces a requirement. In here, we see 11 user stories, all of them refined as we progress through the project. But when you start, you can disagree or change things here as much as you like. You can even approve some of them and then go back and approve the rest of them and adjust it as you progress through the project. And I guess here I will also navigate to the files that we fed into the system to be able to produce the end result. And Gabe, tell us, we have this phase 1 document, phase 2. What does it mean? How we phased it?
Yeah. So before we started the build, we created a phase 1 scoping document of where essentially all of our current processes that go into the commissions administration process. I think it was about 10 to 15 pages that we put together, although, right, still some things that were fluid, in addition to the lovable mockup. So those were kind of two key pieces that we fed Tribal. But what was kind of cool is that we also created like a phase 2, and then you can kind of see like as we were building this, we were able to sort of add that and essentially create like almost like a knowledge repository, right, of like all like our changing requirements for the overall project. So yeah, like this was very key to kind of get up and running quickly. And I'd recommend everyone to kind of take that approach too, to kind of come with as much as possible. And that makes the initial build in Tribal and kind of how it fits, much quicker. So yeah, this was a great capability for us to leverage at the start.
So you were able to add your previous context, and then transform it into a requirements document. And before we move into the remaining parts of the project, what did it mean to you, Gabe, in terms of having to understand certain parts of the evolving requirements or of the project? Did you always have to go to Dima and ask him what's going on, or were you able to query within the system?
Right. So that's one of the good takeaways, right? Is I could kind of query, don't need to go to Dima for everything, although like there's quite a lot that, he helped out on. But yeah, you can query and essentially have a running, a right knowledge history of everything you would want to check up on, create an impact analysis, and really pressure test, right? Like as the build's going on, like see what additional risks may be arising as you're continuing to add things. And so that was helpful too, as like a self kind of correction process. So yeah, it definitely was helpful in that regard.
Here on the screen that Gabe definitely had the conversation and let's say produced test cases for our application. And I can give you a live example. Let's say what criteria do we use to filter pay as you go? It's a very narrow thing that we use in the code. And for Gabe as a business user in regular development, it would meant to go to developer, ask this question. Developer would spend, I don't know, an hour to find this exact query in the code base, which is pretty huge here. But here I can just drop this question, wait for a few seconds or sometimes minutes if the question is more complicated, and I'll get pretty sophisticated answer. And these questions, they can be just exploratory, explain me how this works, or draw me a schema of this part of the process or that part of the process, or it can be like a preparation for some changes we're about to make. Let's say if we introduce a new parameter in the system, how it affects the current architecture. And then Tribal will tell you what the risks are and if it's something that's worth doing or not. So now we'll see the result of this one is in a moment.
Yeah, we'll get the answer in a moment. And what I see that you switched from requirements section to the architecture. So Tribal created the requirements based on the chat and the documentation that you and Gabe fed to it. And what is this architecture screen that we're looking at right now as we wait for the answer?
Yeah, architecture is probably my favorite part of the application because it gives you full visibility on what you are about to build, and in a very visual and a nice way like this, where you have few layers. Security, it's our permission set to gate permission to certain part of the commission app for specific people. Then we have data model, which is quite significant here because we need so many scenarios and so many different calculations and logic inside of it. That is why it builds such a complex structure. Then we have logic layer with all the Apex classes that support and actually calculate this commission. And then, of course, we have UI. All LWCs we have, which we have plenty in this project, are displayed here. And you can review this architecture even before starting building anything. So let's say if Tribal didn't pull the right field that we use an opportunity, I can go here and just direct Tribal to the right field. Let's say we have net CRR manual an opportunity, I can direct Tribal to change it even before we build anything. And now Tribal, I can see that it finished pretty much answering this question. And you see it's a pretty good answer based on the project and everything that we have there. It just identified that the query existing customer accounts, only pay-as-you-go billing mod, and the owner of the account should match the person that we calculate commission for. This is exactly what we have in the system.
So Gabe, that's an answer live straight from the code base, and between the requirements and the architecture and the ability to query the project in this way. If you bring someone new to the team on your side tomorrow, how quick will it be for them to tune right into the project and understand the system without you being in the room?
Fairly quickly, and we actually did this not specific to this project, but just on a couple other ones leveraging Tribal. And they were pretty quick to understand that project requirements and the context, all that by having a conversation with Tribal. So yeah, it makes it fairly easy to get up to speed quickly. And that was our Salesforce admin that we were able to kind of bring on for that scenario.
Incredible. So once the architecture was designed, Tribal actually built all the needed components, right?
Absolutely. And it's also fully visible here in Tribal on their components tab. We can see here that we have 433 components, which is pretty unprecedented number. Like I said, a lot of objects and fields to support all of these calculations, 24 Apex classes, lots of LWC components, tabs, permission set, custom application, and flexi pages for this huge engine. And here, what I like about Tribal is that you can preview visual parts of the application even before deploying anything to any work. And you can, here we have 21 LWC components, and I can switch into each of them and see how it's gonna look in the target org. And I can beautify, I can rearrange things here even before deploying anything to environment.
Gabe, how useful those capabilities were for you? I mean, you were helped by Dima as the forward deployed engineer on the project, but you weren't just on the requirements. You were part of the build itself, weren't you?
That's right. Yeah, especially in the beginning in dev environment, that was a part where I was deeply involved. And it was helpful, right? I think you need to be involved in the project as much as you can to understand how things are being deployed and how some of the representation is shown here, right? So as part of that initial part, right, I had a lovable mockup that I wanted to see how closely Tribal could sort of create that vision and bring to life. And so that's why, especially this area was nice to see, right? Kind of from my involvement early on. But then as things, got more complicated, I think that's where Dima came in and was super helpful and, really took the overall scope of the project at a more sort of, expert level too. But yeah, definitely in the early part, this was super helpful to have and to be able to visualize.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing this. So I think we covered kind of the full flow from building the requirements, seeing the architecture. We talked about how you collaborated with one another, and of course the large iteration resulted in this robust project. Gabe, with this going into production in less than 2 months, what's the bottom line? What changed for Eon because of this? Are you a hero now? What changed with this deployment?
Well, I think everyone's excited to one, get paid out on a monthly cadence and just have visibility, right? So yeah, I think the field is definitely appreciative of this. And initial response has been great. But going forward, right, I think we built something fairly robust that will serve us as we scale. And from a time to value and cost savings perspective, right? If we didn't do this, we likely would have had to, spend a couple of weeks, maybe a month of, looking in the market, what else is out there for a commissions app that can support that scalability. Would have taken quite a lot of time, right? We would have had to pay for that, which is, hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially based on users. And then the configuration and implementation of that's going to take quite a while. And it typically doesn't fit your exact business requirements, the changing business requirements, your business problems, and go to market. And so I think this, the path with Tribal was the correct way and is exactly what we want going forward in terms of that kind of build quickly mentality for, go to market applications. So yeah, this was a huge success.
We're so happy to see the value that you were able to extract so quickly from Tribal. We're happy about your independence and your ability to be so involved along with the rest of your team. Dima, kudos on the large project that you led together with Gabe here. For those of you on the call, if you'd like to join in and explore Tribal and get your hands on it, please reach out to us on gotribal.ai. And also, we're looking forward to seeing you all at Dreamforce next month. We have pretty large presence, quite a few super interesting activities, including workshops, building agents with Tribal. So Gabe, thanks so much for joining and sharing your story with the audience. We're so excited to have Eon, you and your team as a customer. Dima, we're blessed with having talented people like yourself on our team. And for those who joined, thank you for your attention and see you again in a couple of weeks on the next open demo.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Get it.